Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations, conversations for alchemy where we live. And welcome to my kitchen. It thrills me to no end to know that Clay Boykin is with us today, or who's us? With me today. I get Clay to myself, but he's also with you, but at my kitchen table. And with decades of nutrient-rich, hearty conversations always that have happened at my table, I had to find a way to bring it live and bring it out into the world because they're so remarkable and unplanned, unscripted, although I've got some ideas in my head, of course. Clay knows me very well. I usually have a plan, but then I'm willing to let it all fly. And so first of all, let's say hi to Clay. Clay, why don't you tell everybody where you are right now?
I will. Hi, Sandy. I am in Wander Camp. That's Wander at Grand Canyon. And I'm with my dear friends, Sonny and Martin Dowman. And they run Wander Camp. And Wander Camp has got half a dozen locations around the States. And Grand Canyon is one. And as a matter of fact, it is the last campsite. It's a glamping site, by the way, before you can get onto the Grand Canyon property. And it's wonderful. They have people from all over the world that come here to stay.
How magical. And you're there alone. I mean, you've got folks around you, but you didn't bring your wife with you because why?
Well, 2,700 miles in a car is probably the biggest why.
Get it. I get it.
Yeah, I'm making a trip. I was in a workshop in Santa Fe on writing your personal myth with Professor Emeritus Dennis Slattery, Pacifica Graduate Institute. And I was there for a few days and had come out to visit with Martin and Sonny. And then I'm heading to Las Cruces and then to Marfa to see the lights and the observatory and then home.
Well, I'm so glad that you made this work, that we could do this from this very unique, special place. And I'm going to guess that you've got a burner stove somewhere. So officially you are with your kitchen. So we're both at our kitchen table, essentially, you in your comfy chair and mine at my comfy table. I want to start by saying something that I didn't say in the last call, and also kind of frame it in why what's been happening, around the Liminal Odyssey, the book, the alchemical power of the spaces in between, and the magic that kind of has unfolded, the synchronicities, the things that have shown up have been so magical and uncharted, and it's so funny because the reason I called it an Odyssey was because I just had this vision that it was bigger than a journey, that it was and I got this image of everybody on planet Earth putting on space cadet uniforms and really diving deep into those spaces because this is a really important time. And I want to get to that. But one of the and things like Catherine Skaggs showing up with the artwork for the cover of the book, and Jerry Littlejohn writing the music for the audiobook. She's a Native American flute maker, and just all of these angels appearing, all these allies, of which you're one of as well. And then another angel by the name of Monica Willard reached out to me a few weeks ago, and she said, I have an idea, Sandy. And whenever Monica Willard says, I have an idea, I kind of hold on to my seat and say yes, no, before I've heard it, because it's always a good one. And she noticed that on every chapter of the book, I have a symbol. And there's no reference really made to the symbol. It's just to hold the energy of that particular chapter. At the back of the book, I have the symbol descriptions. But she said, you need to bring those into your webinars and your podcasts because they are important. They are another dimension, another element. And we are charting a new frontier, aren't we? We are on an Odyssey. So why not just bring it all in? There's no rules to this. And so if you notice subtly behind the image on the flyer, which you might see below here on Facebook, and you've seen Clay, and we've all put it out there, is a watermark. And I, for this particular call, chose, and every call I use a different symbol. I chose the Triskelion. And I didn't know why at first. I mean, I knew it meant cycles. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. That's relatable, because let's talk about cycles we're in and where we are as a civilization, as an era, as a society right now, and seeing it as cyclical. Nothing's permanent, right? And then I, thought more about it, and it's really dates back to it's like one of the earliest symbols found, dating back to the Neolithic era, which is just about when patriarchy began. And it represents the trilogy. Wild, right? It represents the celestial, the physical, and the spiritual. It's the trilogy, right? And at any rate, so I really wanted to point that out here and start with that. And the fact that let's all remember that we're constantly evolving and how we contribute to that, right? So before we hear from you, because I know I've done a lot of talking here and everyone's here to really hear from you, I want to point out an article that I found on your website, Clay, on clayboykin.com. And it's entitled The New Compassionate Male and the Myth of Liminality. And I hadn't found this article yet. I hadn't seen it before recently. So you've been holding out on me here, because we talked about the book. You've helped me. You've actually contributed greatly to the chapter, and you're named in the chapter on forgiveness. Forgiveness, sacrifice, and bliss is the name of that subchapter. But here you write, and I'm going to read it from your article. In his book, Cosmos and Psyche, Richard Tarnas points to three great myths that are playing out now or today. There are, number one, the myth of human progress, the myth of the fall, and the myth of no pattern. And you go on, Clay, to suggest that there's a fourth myth. It's a myth of liminality, a state of transition between the stages. And I find this fascinating because we talked about the hero's journey and stopping in between those spaces. And here you've been applying it to those myths. So would you speak to that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that article came out, I guess, this last year sometime, and Dr. Rianne Eisler picked it up on her website, as a matter of fact. And we've had her on the podcast recently on In Search of the New Compassionate Male, my podcast, which you've been on more than once. The myth of liminality, everyone, so it seems like everywhere, this is a great time of change. It's a time of change. Some people say the end is near. Well, it's also a beginning. And some people will call it, well, I'm in betwixt and in between. We don't know where we're going. And I think of liminality, I think of it like the trapeze artist. When the trapeze artist comes up and turns loose of one bar, they're hanging motionless in the air for a moment. And it looks like nothing's happening. But from a physics perspective, everything's happening. Like the bar comes up and then they take off on the next. And this liminal space is, to me, a field of incredible possibility. And it may be a pause right on the knife edge before we take off. We have choice, and it's whether to stay put or to grab that bar and go. And so for me, it's a magic time to be awake, to be alert, to be conscious of everything that's going on. And it may seem it is chaotic and so forth, but within that, there's tremendous opportunity. I think that's where we are right now.
I love that analogy and that suspension. And that suspension requires also everything that's happening in that space. But for our mind to wrap around it, there has to be a sense of trust. And also our moment of choice, which we talked about with Deborah Muldow on a call I had a few weeks ago, in her book, Our Moment of Choice, or her book, 43 contributors to that book, that it's our time and we can choose to be its midwife or an obstacle, or not grab the ball at the bar at all. Either way, we're contributing to where that next swing leads us. And we don't know where we're going, but we know we're on our way. And I say that every day. I probably, ironically, when you had Richard Tarnas on a call, I heard something I hadn't really thought about before, which I can say with every single one of your calls that you've hosted on your podcast, In Search of the New Compassionate Male. And that was, I always thought the sign that we are in that space and the trapeze, the bar's coming at us, and what are we going to do? Or are we in that? Are we already suspended now? Wherever you see yourself on that trajectory, or in that vision, how you visualize that, the signs are that I've always said that systems are breaking down. That the seed that's been planted is disintegrating, so new earth can grow. That which no longer serves us is falling off. It hurts. It's not comfortable. And that's another good sign that changes are coming. And what are we going to do in that moment? Then I heard him say this. He said that a sign is that there's a critical mass and a receptiveness to this, which to me explains the attraction that's happening right now with all of us coming together and having these conversations at a rapid rate, at a more intense rate, and at a big, in that critical mass. I'm seeing it everywhere. Like you said, everyone's talking about liminality right now. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
As you were talking, I was like, we're at a point where people are popping their heads up. Some of us are waking up and go, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on? And technology enables us to ask that question globally. And globally see, we can do this way we've always done it in fear, and back into it, or open ourselves to the possibility that there is another way to look at this. And I think our overall level of consciousness is such that we can take a higher level look than the more traditional black and white. That there's so much, the polarization that's happening, that's out there. Everybody, it seems like, in their own echo chambers. But in this workshop that I was just in, one of the gentlemen said, yeah, when we're polarized like that and we're actually shining a light on one another and illuminating one another. And I thought, wow. And we're illuminating the space in between. And where this polarization, people think of the space in between as compromise, where nobody gets really what they want. That's not it at all. The space in between is full of infinite possibilities. Infinite. And what we're doing from our own vantage point is shining a light on those possibilities. It's, I think Carl Jung talked about holding the tension of opposites. But that's it, right there. That space in between. Infinite possibilities so that we can connect at a higher level. Take that possibility and move to a higher level. So that's what comes up for me when you were saying what you were saying.
Yeah, and those spaces in between can be momentary, and they're all around us daily, almost with every breath, how we choose. This reminds me of questioning assumptions. We were talking about this, actually, this is a bit, not really much of a stretch, but before we went live, we were talking about your connection and should you freeze and all this stuff, and what to do. And you pointed out that those are just the rough edges that we're getting accustomed to. And yet those rough edges are where we go, where we could go to question assumptions. Like, why does it have to be a polished production? Hey, we live in this world. Who's to say that it has to be highly produced?
I see that kind of as a metaphor for vulnerability.
Yeah.
I'm okay showing up not perfect, and you're okay not showing up perfect. And thousands of people are going to see you and me showing up not perfect. But that's for you and for me, that's our growing edge. And to be able to say, it's okay. That's that's where we grow. And for it to be polished and all of the rough edges edited out, I believe we lose the texture of progress that we're both experiencing together. And that's what's exciting. Even when my cat walks across the screen during the middle of the podcast, oh well.
That's my favorite. I live for those moments. Well, this brings me then to forgiveness, because when you talk about, and I had no idea that I was going to even talk about forgiveness with you, but that would have been an assumption of what we were going to talk about. But the assumption that forgiveness, and you pointed out and taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. That it doesn't mean there's going to be a zero sum at the end of it all. It means that we recognize that texture that's been gifted to us, that's made us who we are. That's huge. That just blew my mind.
Well, and it's hard to move from, if I'm finding myself in a place of needing to forgive somebody, that means that I'm coming at it from a place of some level of victimhood. And I can stay victim and give my power to that other person or give my power to that situation. Or I can own that. The old saying, not forgiving somebody is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That person may have never realized that they hurt me. And they're off living their happy life, and I'm over here victim. Yeah. So first, I recognize I've got choice, and I can hold on to that victimhood, or I can turn loose of it. And know the pains that we have are some of the biggest lessons to learn. So forgive and forget is not a valid concept in my books. No, have to remember.
Please remember.
But find a new way, a new story with which to look at it.
Yeah.
And to see the bigger story, the bigger message, the opportunity to do something in a healthy way with whatever that pain may have been.
And bless it and thank it, because it's given you a new lesson. And Rian, you mentioned Dr. Rian Eisler, who I love dearly, is both a friend and a mentor of mine. And she always uses the same expression, no matter where I hear her speaking, is it's time for us to remove the wheat from the chaff. Clear that no longer serves us. And that forgiveness is really required in that. And this concept that you presented me with, it's been essential in my Odyssey. Because I think there are a number of things in questioning assumptions also about the way forgiveness has to be, but questioning assumptions on everything. So I want to kind of move to asking you this question. How do we, what do you think, Clay? Another mentor of mine. How can we, what's the trigger? Listen, I can't even find the question. What is the trigger for us to recognize we're operating in that kind of that puppet, we're being puppeteered. We're in that place of assumption of the way things should be. I mean, when do we come to that realization that it doesn't have to be this way? Is there even an answer for that you have?
Well, I think I go, for me, when I find myself blaming something else for my pain or somebody else, he caused this or she caused that, and because of that I'm hurt. I'm in victim mode, and that's a less than. And taking back my power, we can talk about it, and it's perfect. That's a perfect thing to do. Well, it's damn hard. and something has happened, and as a result, it's changed a person's life. My life has been altered in a direction I never thought it would go because of this event, and I'm in pain with that. Just saying forgive it and release it and bless it, it sounds good in theory, but damn, that's hard sometimes. But that's the work that we have to do. If we really want to, if I really want to grow, that's the work that I have to do.
Yeah, and that's a commitment. That's it. So it sounds to me like this brings us to a really important element of this Odyssey, your search of the new compassionate male. Anyone who's on this journey and have committed to it to be a midwife to where we are going is, oh, and I love Connie, this brings in Connie Baxter Marlowe and Andrew Cameron Bailey's The Trust Frequency, and 2 of their 10 assumptions for a new paradigm is not just questioning assumptions, but awareness. So what you're saying is practice awareness. And all of a sudden there's this convergence of all your guests that you've ever had on your show. All of a sudden, Dennis Tardin and Connie and Andrew, and now Jim Doty, Dr. James Doty, MD, who talks about neuroplasticity. And I don't remember if he talked about it on your call, but I've learned that from him, when I first met him probably 10 or 15 years ago. And he talks about the power of practice and creating new neural pathways. And I think that's a really important skill to understand forgiveness and also practice awareness. It's an intention.
This idea of being hardwired, my mind is developed to a point, and then at that point I'm hardwired. He points out, and it's proven that no, our brains do have the ability to change. We can form new neural pathways, and his work in the science all around that proves that out. Him as a neuroscientist who's held another person's brain in their fingers, and now then on the other side, all of the change that is possible. That's incredibly exciting to me.
That speaks to that impermanence, doesn't it? And the assumption that we are as evolved as we're going to be as a civilization, right? And we can't change our thinking.
Well, I want to go back. What popped in my mind earlier was on forgiveness and recognizing that, and I learned this with Cynthia and Will Keepin, Cynthia Briggs and Will Keepin in the Gender Equity and Reconciliation program. And I never really thought about it this way, but we're all wounded. We're all wounded in some way. And to be able to recognize that whatever that person is doing that's affecting other people or whatever, inside that person at a deep, deep level, there's a wound. And Sandy, your wound and my wounds are different. And it's not about whose wound is worse. That's not relevant. But the fact that we're both wounded, that's our common ground. Mm-hmm. And to recognize that also with that wound is a golden spark of a divinity. And if I can hold that and hold that knowing that you may be coming apart on the outside, but I know that deep, deep inside, 2 things, that you're wounded and that there's a golden spark in you. And if I can hold that long enough, the only thing that can happen is that golden spark can awaken. That's real communication. That's real connection. And it's deep. But we can do it.
It sounds like the evolution and the necessary reminder of namaste, really. The wounded in me sees the wounded in you. I mean, this takes us to another level, right? Because that's part of your spirit. Your spirit. The God in me sees the God in you, the divinity in you. But to remember, if we can just remember at that time, whenever we do namaste to one another, that I also honor your woundedness. And I've heard more than a few people say that, that what you're working on is addressing the wounded male heart, but you really see it as, oh no, women are wounded too. But you're working, so
Well,
let's talk about that.
well, it was really revealing to me uh, in part of the gender equity work when it came time for me to speak and to share deeply. And I said, look, I'm the privileged white Western male. I've got everything going for me. You know, and but you know something, I'm wounded too. And then to be in a safe and sacred space to be able to share that wound, a couple of things. One was it was healing for me. It was cathartic and it was healing because there were men and women who were hearing me. And so many times I just want to be heard. Don't fix me, just listen to me. Just hear me. But then afterwards, to have several women individually come over to me and say, Clay, I've stereotyped you as this privileged white Western male and written you off until you said what you said. I never dawned on me that guys are wounded too. Now, again, this is nothing to do with who's wounded worse and whose situation. No, but that we all carry a wound, and that can be a tremendously strong place of common ground and where true change can really happen. Begin.
Well, that's the edges. That's a big edge. That's like a big 40-foot cliff with crashing waves possibly to be concerned about. And yet you're standing there.
That's, Brene Brown, standing in one's truth with an open heart.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of courage. That's what she says. Heart, cur is what Latin for heart.
Yeah.
And if I can show up in a situation and stay wholehearted with the other person who's there closed-hearted, if I can remain wholehearted in that conversation and whatever's blowing past me, I can let it go. There's only one place that person can end up, is wholehearted too.
So can you talk a little bit more about circles of men? I really want everyone to know about that in your podcast. And to the point that is really important, I think, to address is that critical mass, how to impact community. How can we bring along a critical mass? And this reminds me that the idea of community is the culture. The idea of culture of community is really informed by a collective agreement to the way things are. So certainly we're not here to prophesize and say our way is going to get us there, but appealing to the heart and appealing to that wounded heart in both men and women, how do we do that? I mean, you and I are both in, kind of on the same path in terms of convening masses of women and you convening masses of men for that purpose.
Sandy, I mean, there's so much to that question. The one thing that comes to mind is I find it in myself and in others is I look up and I say, I can't change what's going on out there. I can't change the world. And so I go crawl back into my hole and I'm alone. I'm depressed. It's getting me down. Well, that's being unfair. I'm not being fair to myself. What can I do? And I know everybody's heard it before, but it's the old starfish on the beach story. And the little boy's picking up one starfish at a time. There's thousands of them out there. And he's tossing it back into the water one at a time. And the old man comes up and says, Clay, you can't make a difference here. And little boy, he picks it up again. Another one, he tosses it out there and says, I made a difference to that one. So the question for me is, where can I make a difference?
Mhm.
And for some of us, I can only make a difference within myself.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Or beyond that, I can model the way and I can engage in a fashion with one other person and make a difference. We can make a difference. And for other people, that one other person may be 1,000 people or 10,000 people, depending on where we are and what gifts that we have and what we have at us that we may not really be conscious of, but if we're awake, say, oh my God, if I do this, and then it can multiply. Can I change the entire world? No. Don't put your set yourself up for that failure. Don't ask what you can't or say what you can't do, but what I can do. And am I doing that thing? I believe that's my responsibility, is to do that one thing.
I love that you use oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah, I love that you use the expression responsibility. I feel like it's a holy responsibility to show up in our integrity. And that's not a moral statement. It's integrity means our wholeness. And that requires us to remove the wheat from the chaff, doesn't it? And that's all we can do, really, and be a model.
Yeah. Okay, I love Zoom. One of us is frozen.
Oh,
that's okay.
I
think I'm back.
Oh, okay, good, because I always hope that I freeze on a pleasant face, you know. So I didn't. We're fine. You were both alive here.
Yeah, freeze with the most funny face that could ever be.
Always, yeah.
In the circle of men, this whole idea of learning how to connect with one another. You know, we guys grew up not learning how to speak from the heart. Our whole culture pushes that down, you know, and brands it soft and brands it weak. And creating a safe space for men to come together and not be judged, not feel like somebody's going to try and fix them. That somebody's really going to listen while I fumble through and find the words. You know, oftentimes, I may be Laurie and I in a conversation, and she's coming at me with a lot of good stuff, but I can't capture it. I can't capture it fast enough. And I finally have learned to say, I'm flooded. I don't reject anything that's coming at me or coming to me, but I'm flooded. I can't, I have to process. And then the other piece that goes along with that is I know what I want to say. I feel it, but I don't have the words. I don't have the words because I didn't grow up using those words that generate from my heart. So let me try, you know. That comes up to me when I think about the things that we're learning in our men's circle as we're sharing and learning how to have relationships with another man, deep relationships, and learn that we're all going through life. And in fact, we have gone through life and death together, literally. And had I not gotten over my lack of trust in other men, had I not gotten over that through the men's work, I wouldn't know how to handle that and recognize that. So anyway, a little bit about the men's.
Well, and that requires trust. That requires trust and learning to trust other men. And the same is true with women. Early on in SARA, the Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope, the women's interfaith group I started after 9/11, early on we learned about the protocol of reconciliation from Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. And it rooted in indigenous, values of communication and an agreement
Mhm.
while things are still comfortable between us, not waiting until things get on edge or rocky or someone picks up their toys and goes home. It's like, no, we have to stop here and work it out. And in order to do that, we have to be in a place of trust, because trust and creativity typically have to be both present to exist. You can't not trust somebody and not be in a fully creative state with them. And we need creative solutions right now.
You're so right. And what comes up for me as you're saying that is finding the ability to slow down. So much pushing, do things faster, do more things. But to recognize I've got to slow down and nurture that trust, or nurture the relationship, create or recreate the common ground so that we can move forward. So it's almost, if you want to move forward, you gotta sometimes slow down and maybe move backwards. I was taught when I was training for a marathon, this old retired Navy SEAL was training me up, and he said, Clay, if you want to learn how to run faster forwards, learn how to run backwards. Totally counterintuitive. And so, can I take where I've messed up in a relationship? Can I be strong enough and aware enough and have the courage to take the relationship back to the point where we do have common ground and start from there? I don't think about that very often. And that's what's coming up in this conversation. It's Clay, note to self. Slow down. Let's build or rebuild a relationship and then move forward.
You can't rush through liminality. Liminality requires timefulness. We talked about this, timeful, that is like being mindful.
Yes. And I cannot allow myself to be stuck in liminality.
Yeah.
Because whether I believe it or not, the world's going to move forward, and I may be in the liminal space, but if I stay there, I'm going to see things are going to go past me. So I have to be conscious that this is a place to be aware, but not a place to stagnate in.
Oh no.
Reality turns in betwixt and in between.
And it becomes a new place. It's not the in between, and that's what, if I don't mind saying, that's what the Odyssey is about. The Liminal Odyssey is about getting, I want to say getting busy. There's also a lot of being, a lot of acknowledgement, a lot of body awareness, mindfulness, but it's a process. There's no stagnating in that space, because now you're just another space and you're not in that liminal space. You got to start peeking around, questioning assumptions, feeling in your body where something is. And for me, that is a big indicator. I'd ask you how you know that, questioning assumptions. For me, I'm learning how to become more body aware, and go, okay, am I full? I've lost 10 pounds since I wrote this book, and it's not because of stress. It's because I'm completely more body aware. And it's like, my body isn't needing food right now. The assumption I've got to have dessert after dinner, or we've got to eat later than earlier. I mean, the simplest of things make pretty cool, results. I can wear clothes I haven't worn in a while.
I really need to start working really hard on my next book.
Well, I can't wait for your next book, and your book Circles of Men is pretty cool. But with the time that we have here, and I want to make sure that we talk about your life coach work, but also, and not and also your work and Mandala, and your Mandala work, which to me, I have to say, I think it was Brene Brown. Maybe I read it in Atlas of the Heart. I can't remember where I heard it or read it, but that the map is man's greatest invention ever. or something to that effect. And what you're doing is mind mapping. Can I share this? I'm going to share it. I'm not going to ask. I hope it's all right. It's on your site. Can you
There
tell
it
everybody
is.
what we're looking at?
We're we're looking at my personal mandala, and it's been created over many years, and it is forever written in pencil because it's always evolving. And for me, it's the lens through which I see the world. Joseph Campbell talks about taking all the scattered aspects of one's life and putting it in order with the universe. That's what a mandala is. And so for me, that's what I've been doing over the years, is taking pieces, well, what about the precession of the equinox? How did the ancients all know that the world rotated like a top over 26,000 years? What about the megalithic structures? And what about the various religious traditions? And all of these big concepts, how do I put these into context for myself? How do I put all these scattered aspects of my life together in order? And the more centered part of it, the axis, is the relationship between fear and love and darkness and light. And so I can find myself, right now I'm in fear and in darkness. I can choose to stay there, or I can move to another place. And so it's a map of sorts. And Campbell talks about this, and Carl Jung as well, that it's a representation of one of the most fundamental building blocks of life, of quaternity, the sense of four. And when I work with my clients, we take all those scattered pieces and we mind map them out. We put them on a paper, and they may look scattered and make no sense whatsoever. But at some point, they start to move and they start to group. And what happens is those pieces come in to focus and are put into context, and it creates a picture. And all of a sudden, all the scramble that's up in my brain, now I've got a map, I've got a mandala, I've got something. And now that I've got now that I'm there, I've got choice. I can choose to stay in this place over here or this place, or change it. But it gives me that frame of reference. And so there's times that I get stuck. We all get stuck.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what I'm helping people do, is to get unstuck. And to get unstuck is to realize that we all live by a personal myth. And
it gets us out of our head, doesn't it?
It does. And we what is the myth that I'm living by? And is it current? And is it still serving me, or can I evolve forward? So those are the things that it's very gratifying. When I'm working with an individual or with a company, with an organization, just helping people get unstuck.
Yeah, it's really powerful to be able to see things. And it's not unlike journaling, I imagine, because, the spirit is moving from your heart to your hand while you're creating in a different way. And I'm like journaling, you don't want to edit yourself, and stuff comes out. The whole book was a journal. It wrote itself, blew my mind. I'm like, who wrote that? On most occasions. So I know that has happened for you too.
Well, yes. And what I learned was that for me, journaling and writing across the page, it's there and it's okay, but I need spatial relationships and symbols. There's so much that a symbol can mean, but you can't really put it into words. But one symbol with another symbol, it says something. And with that is the nuance. And I believe that in our language, we've lost nuance. And that's where some of the magic is. So to be able to take my words that I've written, and I do a lot of this way, I typically write it across the page just to defy the lines that are on the page. That's me. But to be able to put it into a frame of reference allows me to see it's like in the two pieces that are, that we were talking about earlier, the infinite space of possibility in between. in between the words, the symbols, the people. That's where the nuance is. That's where change can happen. That excites me.
Yeah, you can't conduct electricity without at two ends, right? You have to have something to bounce off of, right? That's really amazing. I just kind of got that. I
There
got
has to be
that.
two ends to a rope, or is no rope.
There has to be two ends to a rope. That's for sure. And wow, and we can do all kinds of things with the rope. We can play jump rope, or we can do harm, and I choose to do jump rope. It's been fun to do jump rope with you. You've been a true friend and a colleague and a savior technically on many occasions, and a mentor. Really, I'm watching you carefully, and the work that you're doing in Circles of Men, In Search of the New Compassionate Male. Everybody go to clayboykin.com. To find out everything you can about Clay. And it's also below here in this message, how to reach Clay. I mean, on this Facebook page. Clay, I just really thank you so much for being here and while you're on your vision quest, your walkabout, your glamping, which it must be hot there. It's like 100 degrees and I'm in Southern Nevada right now.
It is cool and dry.
Oh, cool. Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, dry it is, yeah.
We're about 6,000 feet. So pleasant.
Perfect.
Beautiful last night to watch the blood moon come up and the eclipse.
Oh yeah, with no light pollution, I bet, right?
Yeah, and then this morning, watching this moon that was this big disappear over the horizon.
Magic.
This is a beautiful place, and it's a wonderful setting. It's run like a fine hotel. They have all the processes in place and all the things. They take care of all the small things that make for a big time. So anyway, I have to say that because I'll be back here again.
Well, I'll post that and the website you sent me about where you're at. I'll also, this is all going to go on YouTube as well. So I'll make sure that it gets into the description there so everybody, can go glamping. It sounds magnificent. It sounds really important right now. There's a lot of there's a lot of liminality out there, isn't there? You're the liminality between the two trees behind you. You're holding that tension, and they look very pleased about that.
Sandy, I love our time together. I've loved having you on my podcast, and you've taken and have been a mentor to me the past few years, and I'm tremendously grateful for that.
Oh, Thanks. Well, we've got a lot of work to do, or a lot of jump roping to do. So I've got I'm going in a whole new direction now with playfulness. I love that analogy that a rope has to have two ends. Thank you, Clay.
Thank you, Sandy. Namaste.
Namaste in all its glory. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.